In the heart of Germany, near the region of Saxony, there was a small village called Oberdorf. The date was October 17th, 1452. It was a quiet place, surrounded by dense forests, where its inhabitants led a modest life focused on farming and raising livestock. The village was not known for its wealth or size, but it was regarded as a safe haven for its residents. Until, one night, everything changed. It was a night like any other, with no sign of storms or imminent danger. The villagers retired early to their homes after a long day working in the fields. The fireplaces were lit, candles flickered in the windows, and everything suggested that life would continue its usual routine at dawn. But the next morning, there was no trace of the village. The first to notice the disappearance were the merchants traveling through the area. When they arrived at what should have been a bustling settlement, they were met with an eerie silence. There was no sign of life, no animals, no tools left behind. The buildings were still standing, but they were completely empty. The fields remained untouched, as if their owners had simply vanished overnight. The news spread quickly to neighboring towns. No one could understand what had happened. Local authorities sent messengers and guards to investigate, but they found no clues. There were no signs of struggle, no footprints indicating a mass exodus. Everything seemed as if the entire village had been wiped off the map in the blink of an eye. This marked the beginning of one of the greatest mysteries of the Middle Ages. As the investigation continued, all sorts of theories were considered. Some thought it might have been a bandit attack or a military raid. However, there was no evidence of violence. The doors of the houses were left open, the kitchen utensils still hanging on the walls, and the beds were neatly made as if no one had slept in them. This only deepened the investigators' confusion. The neighboring residents began to speculate that the village was cursed. The more superstitious among them claimed to have seen strange lights in the sky the previous night. They said that the spirits of the forest, angered by some unknown offense, had taken the entire village as punishment. But these stories were baseless and did not explain the complete absence of any signs of what had occurred. However, the theories soon turned darker. There was talk of witchcraft and secret cults that could have claimed the souls of the villagers. Rumors of secret societies were common at the time, and some believed that a cult might have carried out a mass ritual. But once again, the lack of evidence made it difficult to believe these explanations. The mystery remained unsolved. As months passed, interest in the missing village began to fade. Merchants and travelers avoided the area, afraid of meeting the same fate. The authorities eventually abandoned the investigation, convinced that they would never find answers. The village was crossed out of the records and became just another story told around the fires on cold winter nights. But the story does not end there. Decades later, a monk who had heard of the village decided to investigate on his own. Convinced that there was more than just superstition in the case, the monk scoured the area for any overlooked clues. He combed through old records, interviewed witnesses who were still alive, and studied the terrain in detail. What he found was unsettling. According to his research, the village had not disappeared all of a sudden. There were small indications that something strange had happened days before the disappearance. Some old documents mentioned that a couple of villagers had mysteriously fallen ill. They began behaving oddly, speaking in unknown tongues and acting as if they were in a trance. Shortly after, the illness spread. The monk concluded that it could have been an unknown disease that affected the minds of the villagers, leading them to leave their homes in an organized manner, but without a clear direction. However, this did not explain the total disappearance. Even if the villagers had left in a trance, there would have been some trace: footprints, fallen objects, or even bodies. But there was none of that. Desperate for answers, the monk turned to the church archives. There, he found an even more disturbing account. A priest, who had passed through the area on the night of the disappearance, recorded in his diary that he had seen something terrifying. According to the account, he heard a deafening sound coming from the forest and then saw shadows moving in the darkness. The priest described these shadows as human-like figures, but larger and deformed. The priest did not dare to investigate further and left hurriedly. The next day, when he learned of the disappearance, he kept silent for fear of being accused of heresy. The monk who discovered these writings presented them to the church, but was silenced. No one wanted a story like this to spread. The mystery of the village fell back into oblivion, but not for the monk. Convinced that the figures seen by the priest were the key, the monk tried to track down any reference to these shadows in other accounts from that time. What he found was disconcerting. There were other places with similar stories, villages that had disappeared without explanation, always preceded by sightings of these strange figures. But all the reports were vague, filled with superstition and fear. The monk, fearing for his life, left his investigation unfinished. But before disappearing himself, he wrote one last message. In this message, he warned that the village's disappearance was not an isolated event, but part of a much larger pattern. A pattern that had repeated itself over centuries, in different places, and always with the same outcome. Entire villages disappearing without a trace. The monk's message was never published, but it fell into the hands of a modern historian who decided to continue the investigation. This historian discovered that, indeed, there were records in monasteries and local archives that spoke of mysterious disappearances. In some cases, strange lights in the sky were mentioned, in others, strange noises, and in all, the complete absence of evidence. One modern theory suggests that these disappearances could be related to still unknown natural phenomena. Perhaps landslides, sudden weather changes, or even toxic gases released from underground. But again, these theories do not explain why the villages disappeared entirely, nor why the buildings were left untouched. Another, even more controversial theory suggests the possibility of human interference. According to this theory, the disappearances were intentionally caused to cover up some type of activity. Those responsible would have made sure to eliminate every trace of the villagers and their belongings. But who could have the power and capability to do something like this without leaving a single clue? The case of the vanished village remains unresolved. To this day, the village stands as a ghostly reminder of what happened one night in the Middle Ages. Most people see it as just a legend, a story to scare children. But those few who know of the monks and the historian's research understand that behind the legends, there could be something much darker. The mystery of the disappeared village is not just a story from the past. It is a reminder of how little we know about certain historical events. History, like the village itself, is full of gaps. Gaps that, from time to time, remind us that not all answers are within our grasp. And meanwhile, the lost village remains alone in the middle of the forest. A place where the wind whispers through the empty houses, as if it is telling a secret that no one can hear. A secret that, to this day, no one has been able to decipher.